Hey everyone, welcome to 12.4. We're going to talk about attachment theories and parenting styles. Here are your learning objectives, and here is your vocab. Please pause where you need. All right, so talking about attachment first. So this starts at a very young age. From birth, all babies are forming this bond with their primary caregiver. So it's a relationship of me as it's the newborn realizing that someone is going to be there to respond and give them something that they need. So that kind of starts that forming of an attachment. At some point around 8 months, they develop something we call stranger anxiety, where they are showing like a difference between like their primary caretaker and someone else who is unknown. So they have a preference for their primary caretaker and a fear of people who are not them. So that's where they might cry more when they get left with the babysitter. So what is attachment? It is an emotional connection with another person. Simple as that. It's shown in young children when they are seeking to be close to the caregiver, or they show distress when they're not near them, when they're separated from them. Like I said, at drop-off at childcare or babysitting, things like that. Why this happens, why attachment happens. Sigmund Freud theorized that it was because the baby attached to the mom because the mom provided the food. And it was like this fear of like, I need my food supply, so mom needs to be around because she feeds me. This, however, was found to be inaccurate through Harry and Margaret Harlow's experiment. So they conduct an experiment on rhesus monkeys at birth. So they were these baby monkeys separated from their mom, which today we would consider this an unethical study. It would not be conducted. And they gave them a fake monkey. They gave them a monkey with cloth over it. And then they you can see it over here. They cut out a spot and put a bottle in it, so they had food. And so here you see it as two different monkeys, but originally it started off as one. So they learned that that's mom. Then in the experiment, they separated out Freud's theory, which was that they attach because of food. Is it the food, or is it the contact and comfort? The softness, the warmth that they get from the cloth monkey. So in this experiment, they found that it was the contact comfort. It was the cloth monkey that these Rhesus baby monkeys would cling to 22 hours out of 24 in a day. They only stretched over to that wire monkey that had the food when they were really hungry. So to them, their attachment was to the cloth monkey. That's how they saw their connection. So these monkeys, unfortunately, were not able to, because they underwent this experiment. They did not experience any form of attachment. Many of them did not recover because they were isolated from all other monkeys. So they had no social interactions, no caretaker, no social interactions, and it made them very aggressive or very isolated as adults. So in some animals, we see something called imprinting. And this is when some animals, such as geese, such as ducks, for example, they form an attachment during what we call a critical period. So in this case, imprinting, they're born, they hatch out of the egg, and then in those first moments, the first thing that they see as a moving animal, which typically is the mom, they imprint on, which means they attach to in another way. And they will follow that person or that goose, as it should be, wherever they go. So this is how they they learn what they need to learn. It is hard to reverse once established. Humans, we do not imprint on people. We can adapt to other people. So Konrad Lorenz, he conducted this experiment with geese. He had them imprint on them, and they followed him around. So this is just animal attachment. Mary Ainsworth did a study on attachment called the Strange Situation Test. And in this, she wanted to study how responsive parents were to their children had an impact on how secure the child was attached. Which sounds obvious, but we can't assume things in science, right? We need to conduct experiments. So she also found that children who were considered insecure, according to her study, they suffered other issues too. So we'll get into that. So securely attached children, according to Ainsworth, will happily explore their environment. And when the primary caregiver is around, in this experiment, they are in a room playing with toys. The primary caregiver is there. And then a stranger comes in, kind of like think of it as like a babysitter. The primary caretaker leaves. The baby cries. And it's not really about like the baby crying, because the baby is going to cry when the parent leaves, usually, unless there's like severe neglect or abuse. But it's more about what happens when the primary caregiver returns to the room. So if the child is like sad and then the parent comes back and they are happy again, they want to go to make contact, say hello, and then they can go and play around the room. That is considered securely attached. If the parent leaves the room and the child, is going to cry, and then the parent comes back and the child is still crying and maybe even approaches the parent and like shows them that they are like they want their parent to know, you left me, I'm really unhappy about that. So they might act kind of upset, mad. They might act like cold and kind of like ignoring them because they're upset at them. If there is neglect or abuse, the child might show indifference or relief to the parent leaving the room. And then upon return, kind of continue to show like fear and anxiety. So what are the effects of this attachment? So secure attachment predicts social competence. People who were considered securely attached as children are more outgoing, confident, and if they are faced with challenges in life, because they had that secure foundation from their caregivers, they're more willing to try their best at a challenging task. And it's okay if it's hard and it takes time and if you make mistakes. If there is deprivation of attachment, this could be from neglect or abuse, then you're going to see the effect of the child being very withdrawn, maybe frightened about a lot of things in their worlds. Most children who were abused, children are extremely resilient. So people can go through a lot as adults too, and can most of the time be resilient and overcome that. But when we're looking at who tends to be abusive parents, those people do come from abusive homes. Like they were abused and so they abuse. But most people who were abused do not abuse. I hope that makes sense. So in a responsive environment where they're securely attached, that can help them. So let's say that a child came from an abusive or neglectful family, but now they're in another family environment where they are receiving all of that responsive parenting. That can really make a huge difference. And if that's happened when they were little, then by age 10, you wouldn't see any negative effects from that. So again, kind of showing you how resilient we are. All right, quickly, let's switch to parenting styles. So there are 4 different parenting styles. The first one here is authoritative. So these are vocab, by the way. The authoritative parent is nurturing, right? You see they're high on the warmth scale, but they have high expectations. So authoritative, very warm and supportive, open communication. You feel like you can go to that parent, tell them about things, but also they're going to keep you to a high standard. The authoritarian parent has that same high level of expectations, but they are not as warm and fuzzy about it. So they don't necessarily want to hear your stories. See how open communication is not here? They don't want to hear your story. If you have a missing assignment, they don't want to hear the story about what the teacher did or why you couldn't or whatever. You didn't do this thing. You were supposed to do this thing. My expectation is you do that thing. Done. Conversation over. Punishment or whatever. So high expectation, but not always like you don't always feel like you can go to that parent and talk to them and say, well, look, like I do have a lot of missing things. I know that's not your high expectation, but here's the situation. This parent is not going to hear that. This parent, the authoritative parent, will listen to that. It doesn't mean that they won't have any sort of consequences or lower their expectations, but they're going to be more understanding of like things that come up that are unusual. Okay, so next we have the permissive parent. So this one's pretty straightforward, right? This parent is very warm and supporting, very open communication and nurturing, but then they are low on the expectations and the control over you. So there's maybe no curfew or like you get some bad grades. Oops, sorry. That's okay. So they're very understanding and they don't really like set high expectations for you. They'll still be happy when you reach those landmarks or achievements, but they don't set those same high expectations that the authoritative parent does. They're like, oh, you came home at 1 a.m., you have school tomorrow. You know, there's obviously this is a spectrum, right? Your parent might fall on the permissive, but like on the lower end of the permissive and whatever. It's a spectrum. Okay, the last one is uninvolved, or you could say neglectful. Could also be called neglectful. So this is where the parent has low expectations, right? They're not really like setting boundaries, but they're also not warm and supportive. So basically, the child isn't getting attention. They're not getting attention on what they should be doing with their life, how they should be behaving day to day, but they're also not getting communication, affection, support. So it's neglectful. So according to research, authoritative parents, high expectation, high warmth and support, those often produce children who have the higher self-esteem, are more self-reliant, and are more socially competent. However, this is not a one-size-fits-all, right? Certain people need a certain different style, maybe a different time of their life. Their parent is more one type of parent and the other way. Some people have a mom who has a certain way, a dad who has another way, grandparent who has another way. Like, whoever your caretakers are, like, they might have different styles. And if you have siblings, they might be the same parent, but for you, they're authoritarian, and for your sibling, they're more permissive or authoritative. And that could do with a lot of factors. There could be cultural factors that make them, treat different kids differently by who's the oldest, by their gender. Culturally, there can just be differences in parenting styles. And yeah, that's all I want to say about that. And so ultimately, authoritative is the one that allows people to feel the most sense of control over their life. Like, I understand that I have these expectations, but I know if something comes up, I can communicate with my parents and they're on my side. They're going to overall help me. So sense of control is very important for our happiness, for our self-esteem, and for feeling competent. So takeaways, remember that the Harlow experiment showed that babies attached to contact and not food, like Freud once thought. Some animals imprint, meaning they attach or bond to the first moving thing they see. That was Conrad Lorenz. Ainsworth's strange situation test shows that responsive parents create securely attached children. Children are overall resilient. If they've experienced neglect and abuse and they move to another family, they can recover from that, and most people do. Remember the four different parenting styles, and remember that overall, generally speaking, authoritative, according to research, is the best model, but it's not one size fits all.